The billionaire promised her forever,
You left me for a truck driver.
but she dumped him for a truck driver.
You left me for
Grant's voice was low, controlled, the kind of controlled that took years of practice. Lana didn't flinch. She looked at him the way you look at something you used to be afraid of, and suddenly aren't anymore. I didn't leave you for him, Grant. I left you for me. He just happened to be the first person who made that feel possible. The room went completely still. And that right there is the moment this whole story hinges on. Not a courtroom, not a check, not a headline, just a woman who finally said out loud what she had known in her bones for years. But before we get there, I need to ask you something. Have you ever built a life that looked absolutely perfect from the outside and felt completely hollow on the inside? Have you ever been loved in a way that slowly, quietly made you smaller? Have you ever walked away from everything the world told you to want because staying would have cost you the one thing no amount of money can replace? You are the ones who know that love is not a transaction. You are the quiet, brave ones who chose truth over comfort, freedom over security, and yourself over the applause of people who never really saw you. May every door that was shut in your face open into something better. May every person who underestimated you live long enough to see exactly how wrong they were. And may you never again shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's idea of who you should be. If that hit something in your chest, write "I stand with Lana" in the comments right now. Let her story be heard. Stay with me till the very end to see how a woman with nothing left to lose became the one thing a billionaire could not buy, could not threaten, and could not get back. Lana Voss was not the kind of woman who needed saving. That is the first thing you need to understand about her. She was not lost when Grant Aldrich found her. She was not broken. She was not waiting. She was 26 years old, sharp as a blade, working as a project coordinator for a nonprofit that helped underfunded schools get access to technology programs. She cared about the work. She showed up early and stayed late, not because anyone was watching, but because that was simply who she was. She wore simple clothes. She drove a car with a dent in the rear bumper that she kept meaning to fix. She ate lunch at her desk more days than not, and her idea of a perfect Friday evening was a book, a bowl of pasta, and nobody needing anything from her for a few hours. She was not the kind of woman you would expect to find at the center of a story like this. And that is exactly what makes this story worth telling. Grant Aldrich came into her world on a Tuesday afternoon in March. His firm, Aldrich Capital Group, had funded the nonprofit for 2 years, and the visit was supposed to be routine, a walkthrough, a few handshakes. The kind of thing powerful men do to feel connected to causes without actually getting their hands dirty. Lana was in the middle of a presentation when he walked in. She didn't stop. She didn't adjust her tone or straighten her posture or do any of the things people do when someone important enters a room. She just kept going, because the work mattered and the presentation wasn't finished. Afterward, Grant found her by the coffee machine. "You didn't stop when I came in," he said. "You weren't part of the presentation," she said, without looking up from pouring her coffee. He smiled. "Most people stop. Most people are performing," she said. "I was working." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I take you to dinner?" It wasn't really a question. But the way he said it, there was something underneath it that felt genuine, like he was actually asking, like the answer actually mattered to him. She said yes. That dinner turned into 3 dinners. 3 dinners turned into weekends. Weekends turned into conversations that stretched past midnight, both of them leaning across small tables in quiet restaurants, talking about ideas and failures and what they each believed the world owed people who worked hard and stayed honest. Grant was brilliant. That was real. Whatever came after, that part was always real. He could walk into any room and within 10 minutes understand exactly how it worked, who held the real power, what everyone wanted, and how to make them feel like he was offering it. He had built Aldrich Capital from nothing into something that moved markets, and he had done it through a combination of genuine vision and an almost frightening ability to read people. He read Lana, too. He just read her correctly at first. "You see things other people miss," he told her once, early on. "You walk into a problem and you go straight to the center of it. No detours, no performance, just the thing itself." She had felt, in that moment, truly seen. That feeling, that specific feeling of being truly seen by someone you respect. It is one of the most powerful things one human being can offer another. And when it is real, it changes you. And when it turns out to be a tool, it breaks something in you that takes a long time to name. They got married 14 months after that first dinner. The wedding was small by Grant's standards, which meant 200 people in a venue that cost more than Lana's parents had earned in a decade combined. She wore a dress she loved. She meant every word of the vows. For a while, everything was good. More than good. Grant was attentive and generous. He took her to places she had never been. He introduced her to people who challenged her thinking and made her better. He made her feel, consistently, like the most interesting person in whatever room they were in. But somewhere in the second year, something shifted. It was so gradual that she didn't have a name for it until long after it had already reshaped her life. It started with small things. A comment about the dress she wore to one of his firm's events. Not cruel, just precise. "That color doesn't really work in photos, and there will be cameras tonight." She changed the dress. A suggestion that she scale back her hours at the nonprofit. "You don't need to work like that anymore, Lana. It looks like we need the money. We don't." She reduced her hours. A quiet observation that one of her closest friends, a woman named Holly she had known since college, was a little much at group dinners. "She dominates every conversation. Have you noticed that?" Lana started seeing Holly less. None of it was a command. Grant never commanded. He was far too smart for that. It was always a suggestion, an observation, a gentle concern offered from a place of love. And because she loved him, and because she trusted him, and because each individual thing seemed so small, she adjusted. Again and again and again. Until one morning she was standing in their kitchen, in a house that cost $4 million, wearing clothes he had approved, holding a schedule he had shaped, with a phone full of contacts that were mostly his people, and she looked at her own reflection in the window above the sink and did not entirely recognize the woman looking back. She had not quit her job at this point. She had simply been quietly redirected away from it, one reasonable suggestion at a time, until her role had shrunk from coordinator to occasional consultant to someone whose professional identity existed mainly as a footnote in her husband's biography. She tried to talk to him about it. "Grant, I feel like I've lost something, like I'm not really doing anything that's mine anymore." He had looked at her with what appeared to be genuine concern. "You're doing everything, Lana. You run this house. You show up for every event. You support everything I'm building. That's not nothing. That's your life," she said quietly. "I want something that's mine. Everything I have is yours," he said. And he said it like he meant it. But that was the problem. He thought giving her his world was the same as giving her space in it. He could not understand, or would not understand, that what she was asking for was not a share of his life, but the return of her own. The breaking point did not come with a fight. There was no explosion, no dramatic confrontation, no single terrible moment she could point to and say, "That is where it ended." It ended quietly, on a Wednesday evening in November. Grant was at a dinner she had declined to attend, and Lana was sitting alone in a $4 million house, in a room she had decorated but didn't feel comfortable in, trying to remember the last time she had done something purely because she wanted to. She sat there for a long time. Then she got up, went to the bedroom, and packed one bag. Just one. She did not take the jewelry, or the credit cards, or any of the things that were technically hers. She took her clothes, her laptop, her grandmother's watch, and the small framed photo of her and Dana at the beach the summer after college. She drove 4 hours to her sister's house without calling ahead. When Dana opened the door at 11:30 at night and saw Lana standing there with one bag and dry eyes, she didn't ask a single question. She just stepped aside, opened the door wider, and said, "I'll make tea." Grant's message came the next morning. One line: "You will regret this." Not "I love you," not "please come back," not "what happened, can we talk." Just that. A promise wearing the clothes of a prediction. Lana read it once, set her phone face down on Dana's kitchen table, and drank her tea. She did not respond. And that silence, that single act of not responding, was the first decision she had made, entirely for herself, in longer than she could remember. It felt terrifying. It felt like the first honest breath she had taken in years. The diner was called Merle's, which was the name of a man who had been dead for 11 years, but whose daughter, a quiet woman named Beth, had kept the sign up because she said it still felt like him in there. It was the kind of place that had the same menu it had in 1987, the same booths with the same rips in the vinyl, and coffee that was never exceptional, but was always hot and always there. Lana started working there 6 weeks after leaving Grant. She had not planned to work in a diner. She had a master's degree and 7 years of professional experience, and a resume that, before Grant had quietly dismantled her career, one suggestion at a time, had been genuinely impressive. But the city she had moved to was 4 hours from everything she knew. Her professional network in this area was essentially non-existent, and the nonprofit sector jobs she applied for were slow to respond. She needed income now, not in 6 to 8 weeks when hiring committees made their decisions. Beth had put a handwritten "Help Wanted" sign in the window. Lana had walked past it 3 times before she walked in. "You're overqualified," Beth said, looking at the single page Lana handed her. "I'm available," Lana said, "and I'll show up on time every single day." Beth studied her for a moment the way older women sometimes study younger ones, when they recognize something in them they once recognized in themselves. Then she nodded once and said, "Friday starts at 6. The work was physical, in a way Lana had not anticipated. Her feet ached for the first 2 weeks. She dropped a plate on her third shift and stood there staring at the pieces on the floor for just a second too long before she picked them up, and Beth pretended not to notice. The regulars were a particular kind of creature, loyal and specific, and mildly suspicious of anything new, and it took Lana the better part of a month before most of them started treating her like she actually belonged there. But she kept showing up. And slowly, almost without noticing, she started to find something in the rhythm of the work that she had been missing for years. It was simple. It was honest. You came in, you did the thing, you could see exactly what you had done at the end of the shift. Nobody was managing her perception or steering her quietly toward a smaller version of herself. The coffee needed to be hot. The orders needed to be right. The customers needed to feel like someone was glad they came in. She could do all of that. And nobody needed to approve it first. She had been working at Merle's for about 2 months when it rained for 3 days straight, in the way that particular region does in late autumn. The kind of rain that is not dramatic but is simply relentless, gray and cold and everywhere. It was a Friday. The diner was loud, the way it always got on Friday nights, conversations overlapping, the smell of coffee and fried food thick in the air, the bell above the door ringing every few minutes as people came in out of the weather. Lana was behind the counter refilling a mug when the door opened and a man walked in shaking rain off his jacket with the particular weariness of someone who had been outside in it for a long time. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better days, and boots with actual mud on them, not the decorative kind, actual mud from actual ground. He looked around the diner once, not like he was evaluating it, just getting his bearings, and then he walked to the far end of the counter and sat down. He picked up the laminated menu and read it with the focused attention of a man who was genuinely hungry and genuinely cold, and for whom this was not a casual decision. Lana came over. "What can I get you?" He looked up. He had the kind of face that was not immediately remarkable, but became more interesting the longer you looked at it. Steady eyes, a tiredness that was earned, not performed. "Whatever's hot," he said. "I've been driving since 4 this morning." She brought him the soup of the day, which was a chicken and vegetable situation that Beth made from scratch every morning, and that was, genuinely, the best thing on the menu. She set it down in front of him with a piece of bread on the side. He looked at the bowl and then looked up at her. "Thank you," he said. It was not remarkable. People said thank you in diners all the time. But there was something in the way he said it that registered differently. Like it was not automatic. Like he had actually noticed that she had brought him something and was actually grateful for it. She went back to her other tables. A few minutes later, she swung back to check on him. He had finished half the soup and was reading a paperback book he had pulled from his jacket pocket. An actual book, not his phone, a book with a cracked spine that had clearly been read before. She refilled his water without being asked. He looked up again. "Thank you," he said again. Twice. She noticed that. His name was Cole Mercer. She did not learn this on that first night. On that first night he was just a man in a wet flannel shirt who said thank you twice and read an actual book and left a tip that was more than it needed to be for a bowl of soup and some bread. But he came back. The following Tuesday. Same seat at the far end of the counter. Same order, whatever's hot. He was reading a different book this time. Same cracked spine quality. Same sense that it had been chosen because he actually wanted to read it, and not because someone was going to ask him about it later. He came back the Friday after that. And the Tuesday after that. After about 3 weeks of this, Lana said, "You know we have other seats." He looked up from his book. "I know. Just checking," she said. He almost smiled. "This one's got the best angle on the door. Habit. When you drive long haul, you always want to see the exit. Does that apply to diners too?" "It applies to everywhere," he said, and went back to his book. She found herself looking forward to Tuesdays and Fridays in a way she did not immediately examine too closely. The thing about Cole was that it was never one large thing. It was always small things that added up. The books, the tips, the way he listened when she spoke, not waiting for his turn but actually listening, tracking what she said, and responding to it directly. The evening an elderly man at table 4 fumbled his fork, and it clattered to the floor, and Cole was off his stool and picking it up before Lana had fully registered what happened, handing it back to the man with a quiet, "Here you go, sir," and returning to his seat without any look of wanting to be noticed for it. She noticed anyway. It was about 6 weeks into his regular appearances at Merle's that they had their first real conversation. Not the back and forth of customer and server, but an actual conversation. It was a slow night. The rain had come back. Most of the regulars had gone home early, and the diner had that particular quiet it got sometimes, warm and contained, like its own small world separate from everything outside its windows. Cole had finished his food and was on his second coffee, and Lana had nothing urgent demanding her attention. She found herself leaning against the counter near his end, and he closed his book, and somehow they started talking. She didn't remember exactly how it started. Something about the rain. Something about how different rain felt depending on where you were when it found you. And then somehow they were talking about other things. His routes, which took him through parts of the country most people only ever saw from 30,000 feet in the air. Her work at the nonprofit, which she mentioned almost hesitantly, like she wasn't sure she was still allowed to count it as hers. "Why do you say it like that?" he said. "Like you're not sure you're allowed to mention it." She paused. "I don't know. It feels like a long time ago." "How long?" "A few years." He nodded slowly, did not push, just left space. She appreciated the space. When her shift ended, she was putting on her coat in the back when she realized Cole was still at the counter, paying his bill. He held the door open for her when she came out, which she accepted without reading too much into it, and they both stood for a moment under the narrow overhang, looking at the rain. "I'm parked around the block," he said. "Me too," she said. They walked together as far as the corner where their directions split. Neither of them moved immediately to go their separate ways. And then Lana said, without entirely planning to, "Are you hungry?" "I mean actually hungry, because that soup is good, but it's not a meal." There was a gas station 2 blocks down that had a surprisingly decent rotating selection of prepared food, which was a sentence that sounded like a joke, but was simply true. They ended up sitting on the hood of her car in the gas station parking lot, which was dry enough under a narrow canopy, eating sandwiches that were better than they had any right to be, talking for another hour and a half, in the way that happens when you have not had a real conversation in a long time, and then suddenly you are having one. She told him about Grant, not everything, the short version. Rich husband, slow suffocation. She left. She said it plainly, the way you say something you have decided not to be ashamed of anymore, and she watched his face while she said it, to see what he would do with it. He did not look uncomfortable. He did not immediately offer an opinion or a solution, or a reflection on what she should have done differently. He just listened until she was finished. Then he said, "Did he ever hurt you?" "Not the kind you can see," she said. Cole was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the rain beyond the canopy. "Those are the ones that take longer to heal," he said. That was all. No advice, no outrage on her behalf. No performance of sensitivity, just a simple, honest acknowledgement that what happened to her was real and that real things take real time. She drove home alone 20 minutes later and sat in her parked car in front of Dana's building for a few minutes before going inside. She was not sad. She was not overwhelmed. She was something she did not have a clean word for, something that felt like the very early stages of being okay. She went upstairs. Dana was still awake, reading on the couch. She looked up when Lana came in. "You look different," Dana said. "Different how?" Dana considered this for a moment. "Like you remembered something you forgot you knew." Lana thought about that later, lying in the dark. She thought Dana might be right. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, on a Thursday evening in early spring, when the air had just started to smell like something other than winter, Lana's phone rang. She was at the kitchen table in the apartment she had moved into 2 months prior, a modest 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that had a broken elevator and a landlord named Owen who fixed things within a reasonable amount of time and asked no unnecessary questions. It was nothing like the $4 million house. The ceilings were lower, the windows were smaller. The whole place could have fit inside Grant's living room with room to spare. She loved it in a way she had never loved that house. She was going through her notes for a project manager role she had applied for at a local tech nonprofit when the phone lit up with a number she recognized immediately, even though she had not seen it in months. She had not deleted it. She was not sure why. Perhaps because deleting it would have felt like a decision, and she had not been ready to make it. She stared at the screen for 3 rings. Then she answered. Lana. Grant's voice was exactly as she remembered it. Smooth. Measured. The kind of voice that had spent years being the most confident sound in any room it entered. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. What do you need, Grant? A brief pause. Just long enough to signal that he had noticed she did not say it was fine. Did not soften the edges the way she once would have. I've been doing some thinking. About us. About how things ended. How things ended? She repeated. I know I wasn't perfect, Lana. I've had time to reflect on that. His tone shifted into something that sounded like vulnerability. She recognized it the way you recognize a magic trick the second time you see it performed. I think we gave up too quickly. I think with the right conversations, the right support, we could have worked through what was happening. Grant. I'm serious. I've spoken to someone, a therapist actually, and she's helped me see some things about my patterns that I wasn't aware of before. Grant, she said again, more firmly this time. He stopped. What do you actually want? She said. Not the version you prepared. The actual thing. A longer pause this time. When he spoke again, the softness was still there, but something underneath it had shifted slightly, like a floor that gives just a little when you step on it. I heard you've been spending time with someone, a truck driver. There it was. She almost laughed. Not from amusement, but from the specific relief of having the real thing finally arrive after the performance. Where did you hear that? She said. It doesn't matter where I heard it. What matters is that I'm concerned. You're a brilliant woman, Lana. You deserve someone who can actually match where you're going, who can give you a life that reflects who you are. You mean a life that reflects who you think I should be? That's not fair. It's accurate, she said. There's a difference. She could hear him recalibrating on the other end of the line. She had heard that silence before too. The half-second where Grant Aldrich, who always had the next word ready, searched for the right angle. He's a truck driver, Grant said, and this time the smoothness had a thin edge to it, like something sharp wrapped in cloth. He can't give you anything close to what you had with me. Lana was quiet for a moment. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she wanted to say it correctly. She wanted it to be precise. You know what the difference is between you and Cole, she said. When I talk, you wait for me to finish so you can respond. When Cole talks, he actually listens, not because he's performing listening, because he's interested. In what I'm saying, in who I am. She paused. You were interested in what I reflected back to you. That's not the same thing. The line was quiet. You never understood what I wanted, Grant. That was always the problem. She ended the call. She set the phone down on the kitchen table and sat with the silence for a moment. Her heart was beating faster than she would have liked, but her hands were steady, and she decided that was good enough. She picked the phone back up and texted Cole. Are you driving tonight? His response came 4 minutes later, which meant he was pulled over somewhere, checking his phone the responsible way. Stopped for fuel in Caldwell. Back around 10. Everything okay? She looked at that last part. Everything okay. Not a demand, not an interrogation, just a door left open in case she needed to walk through it. She typed back, yeah, just wanted to say hey. His reply was a single word, hey. She smiled at her phone in her empty apartment, like a person who had forgotten they were allowed to do that. The first sign came 8 days later. Owen, her landlord, knocked on her door on a Tuesday morning. With the expression of a man delivering news he genuinely did not want to deliver. He held his cap in both hands and turned it slowly while he talked, which she had already learned was what he did when he was uncomfortable. I don't understand all the details myself, he said. My property manager called yesterday. Apparently there's some kind of legal complication with the building's ownership structure. Something that's been dormant for years just got flagged. They're saying I may need to vacate all units while it gets sorted out. Lana looked at him steadily. How long has this building been yours, Owen? 17 years. And this complication just appeared. He turned his cap again. That's what they're telling me. I'm sorry, Lana. I want you to know I think this is as strange as you do. I'm looking into it. She thanked him and closed the door. She stood in the middle of her small living room and breathed for a moment. Then she called Dana. He's been asking questions in your neighborhood, Dana said, before Lana could finish explaining what Owen had told her. Dana's voice was careful and tight. I didn't want to worry you, but a man came to my building last week asking the super about me. Said he was doing a background check for a mutual acquaintance. The super told him nothing because he didn't know anything, but Lana, it felt wrong. Lana sat down on her couch. She connected the points in her mind, the way you connect stars into a shape. The phone call from Grant. His knowledge of coal. Owen's sudden legal complication after 17 years of clean ownership. A man asking questions about Dana. None of it was loud. None of it had Grant's name on it. That was the point. She had watched him operate for 3 years. She knew how he worked. He never touched anything directly. He used distance the way a surgeon uses instruments. Precisely, deliberately, with complete deniability at every step. What he wanted was for Lana to feel the pressure without being able to name its source. To feel the walls moving without being able to point to the person moving them. It was designed to make her doubt herself. It was designed to make her tired. And then, 2 weeks after Owen's visit, the job fell through. The tech nonprofit role she had applied for had come down to 2 candidates, and she had made it to the final round. The hiring manager had called her after her second interview, warm and encouraging, telling her they expected to have a decision within days and that she should feel very good about where things stood. The email came on a Thursday afternoon. It was polite and brief. They had decided to move in a different direction. She was thanked for her time. She had seen this kind of language before. It did not mean they had found someone better. It meant something had changed. She called the hiring manager directly, which was bold, but she was past caring about bold, and left a message asking simply if there was any feedback she could learn from. The hiring manager did not call back. One of the nonprofit's board members did, 3 days later, a woman named Grace who had met Lana at a community event months before and who sounded genuinely uncomfortable making this call. I don't know the full picture, Grace said carefully. But one of our major donors raised a concern about a candidate in the final round. Not specific, just a concern. And with our funding situation being what it is, the board didn't feel they could ignore it. A major donor, Lana said. I really can't say more than that. I'm sorry, I think you're exceptional, and I hope you find something worthy of you very soon. Lana thanked her and ended the call and sat very still at her kitchen table for a long time. She was not broken by this. She wanted to be clear about that, at least to herself. She was not crumbling, but she could feel the specific weight of what was happening, the way it was designed to accumulate. One thing, and then another thing, and then another thing, until the person on the receiving end started to believe that the world was simply not going to cooperate with them, until they started to wonder if going back was easier than going forward. That was the architecture of it, and she recognized it because she had lived inside something built the same way for 3 years, just more slowly, just more gently. Dressed up as love instead of dressed up as bad luck. She picked up her phone, and this time she did not text Cole. She called him. He answered on the second ring. She could hear the low hum of the road in the background. Hey, he said, give me 2 seconds. The hum changed, and then quieted. He had pulled over. Okay, I'm here. What's going on? She told him everything. The landlord. Dana's neighborhood, the job, Grace's phone call, all of it, in order, plainly, without editorializing. Cole listened without interrupting once. When she finished, there was a brief silence. "Lana," he said, "how long has this been building?" "About 3 weeks since the call from Grant. But honestly, I think it started the night I hung up on him." "Okay." His voice was steady in the specific way that steadiness means something, not the steadiness of someone who doesn't understand the weight of what they're hearing, but the steadiness of someone who has decided the weight is not going to move them. "I'll be back tomorrow morning. Can we talk in person?" "You don't have to cut your route short." "I'm not cutting it short. I've got one more stop tonight and I'm done. I'll be back by 9. A pause. "This matters. You matter. 9 o'clock. She closed her eyes for a moment. 9 o'clock, she said. She slept better that night than she had in 3 weeks, which was something she thought about later and decided she did not need to analyze too carefully. Sometimes a person just needs to know that someone is coming. Not to fix it, not to fight it, just to show up and be there while you figure out what to do next. Cole showed up at 9:03. He had stopped somewhere on the way and brought 2 coffees in paper cups and a paper bag with breakfast sandwiches from a place she did not recognize, which meant he had looked something up, specifically because he was bringing breakfast to her and wanted it to be good. He set everything on her small kitchen table and sat down across from her and said, "Tell me again from the beginning, all of it." So she did. And this time, as she talked, she watched him listen, and she thought about what she had said to Grant on the phone. About the difference between waiting for someone to finish and actually hearing what they say. And she understood, sitting there in her small kitchen with paper cups and a paper bag between them, that she had not overstated it. This was what she had meant. Riley Cross worked out of an office on the 2nd floor of a building that had a dry cleaning shop on the ground floor and smelled permanently of steam and fabric. The office itself was small and cluttered in the specific way of someone who processed enormous amounts of information and had made peace with the fact that filing systems were less important than outcomes. There were stacks of folders on every surface, a whiteboard covered in names and arrows and dates, and a single plant on the windowsill that was either very hardy or artificial. Lana could not tell which. Riley herself was in her early 40s, with short dark hair and the kind of direct eye contact that some people found uncomfortable and Lana found immediately reassuring. She had a reputation in the area for taking on cases that involved people with more money than conscience on one side and people with more truth than resources on the other. She did not win every time, but she was known for making the other side work for it in ways they did not anticipate. A colleague of Dana's had mentioned her name. Lana had called the next morning. "Sit down," Riley said, when Lana arrived for their first meeting, without looking up from the folder she was closing. "Tell me what's happening, and don't leave anything out. I'll stop you if I need clarification." Lana sat down and told her everything. She had gotten good at this by now, laying it out in order, clearly, without the emotional weight she felt around it bleeding into the facts themselves. The marriage, the divorce, Grant's phone call, the pattern of interference that followed, Owen's complication, Dana's neighborhood, the job, Grace's call. Riley listened the way Lana imagined she listened to everything, completely still, eyes focused, a pen moving occasionally across a notepad, but never losing track of what was being said. When Lana finished, Riley sat back. "Okay," she said. "First thing, none of what you've described is unusual for someone in Grant Aldrich's position, and with his particular personality type. This is a recognizable pattern. The distance, the deniability, the accumulation of small pressures rather than one large one. It is specifically designed to be difficult to prove." "Can it be proven?" Lana asked. Difficult is not the same as impossible, Riley said. What we need is documentation. Every incident, dated, described in detail, with every connection you can identify, noted separately. We build a timeline. Patterns are evidence, not always the kind that wins in court on its own, but the kind that, when combined with other elements, tells a story that is hard to argue with. What other elements? Riley looked at her steadily. That depends on what's out there. Aldrich Capital is a large operation. Large operations have people in them. People who see things. People who, under the right circumstances, decide that what they've been carrying is heavier than what they'd risk by putting it down. Lana thought about that. You think someone inside his organization might talk? I think it's possible. I'm not promising anything I don't have yet. What I'm promising is that we build this correctly, one piece at a time, so that whatever does come, we're ready for it. She slid a yellow legal pad across the desk. Start writing. Everything you told me, in order, with dates where you have them, and approximations where you don't. I want it in your handwriting, not typed. There's something about handwritten documentation that reads differently in proceedings. More human, harder to dismiss. Lana picked up the pen. She wrote for 40 minutes while Riley made phone calls in the hallway, her voice too low to make out the words. By the time Riley came back, Lana had filled 11 pages. Riley picked up the pad and read through it without sitting down, turning pages slowly, occasionally making a small mark in the margin. Good, she said finally, setting it down. This is good. You have a clear mind under pressure. That's going to matter. What happens now? Lana said. Now we start pulling threads. I have a contact at the county assessor's office who can look into the legal complication with your building and tell us whether it materialized naturally or was nudged. That will take a week, maybe 2. She paused. In the meantime, I need you to do something that is going to feel counterintuitive. What? Nothing. Don't confront Grant. Don't contact him. Don't respond to anything that feels like provocation. Every time he reaches out directly or through channels, document it and send it to me, and then do absolutely nothing. Can you do that? Lana thought about the phone in her pocket, and Grant's number in it, and the very specific satisfaction she would feel from telling him directly what she now knew he was doing. Yes, she said, I can do that. Good, because the moment you respond, you give him something to work with. Right now he is performing. Let him perform. The longer he performs, the more material he creates. Lana nodded. She left Riley's office feeling something she had not felt since this began. Not relief, not yet, and not confidence exactly, but something adjacent to both. The feeling of having taken a step in the right direction after standing still too long. She told Cole about Riley that evening. He had stayed in town for 2 days after their kitchen table breakfast, adjusting his schedule in the quiet way he did things, without making a production of it. They had spent most of those 2 days in ordinary proximity, her working on the documentation Riley had asked for, him reading at her kitchen table or making food or doing the crossword from a newspaper he had picked up somewhere, and it had been, without either of them naming it, the most comfortable Lana had felt in a shared space in years. Riley sounds like the right person, he said when she finished explaining. She's direct. I appreciate direct. You would, he said, not unkindly. She looked at him across the table. Cole, can I ask you something? Yeah. Why are you still here? Not here right now. I mean in this situation. Grant is clearly not going to stop at the letter. This is going to get more complicated before it gets simpler. You could walk away from this very cleanly. You've known me for what, 4 months? Cole set down his pen. He looked at her in the direct, unhurried way he looked at things he was taking seriously. When I was 19, he said, I watched my father walk away from my mother when things got complicated. She was dealing with something real and hard, and he decided the math didn't work for him anymore. He paused. I made a decision then about what kind of man I was going to be. Not a dramatic decision, just a quiet one. I was going to be the kind of man who stayed when staying was hard. Lana was quiet. This isn't complicated for me, he said. You're a good person in a bad situation, caused by someone who has a lot of resources and not a lot of conscience. The only question I've asked myself is whether I can be useful. And the answer is yes. So I'm here. She looked at him for a long moment. That's a very simple way to see it, she said. Most things are simpler than people make them, he said, and picked up his pen again. 3 weeks into building the file with Riley, Cole came to Lana's apartment on a Wednesday evening. He let himself in with the key she had given him the week before, which had been a small thing that felt large in the way small things sometimes do. He set his jacket on the chair by the door. He had a folded piece of paper in his hand. He set it on the kitchen table without saying anything. Lana looked at it. Then she looked at him. His expression was calm, but there was something underneath it. A quality of containment, like an engine running very quietly at higher than normal speed. She picked up the paper and unfolded it. It was printed on heavy cream stock. At the top, in embossed letters, it read, Aldrich Capital Group. Below that, the language was formal and precise, and deliberately intimidating. A cease and desist notice directed at Cole Mercer personally, alleging that he had engaged in a coordinated campaign to interfere in private business matters, to damage the personal and professional reputation of Grant Aldrich, and to encourage third parties to act against Aldrich Capital Group's interests. She read it twice. Cole had never contacted Grant Aldrich. He had never written about him, spoken about him publicly, called any of his associates, or done a single thing that touched Grant's world. He had driven his roots, eaten soup at Merle's, sat at her kitchen table, and shown up when she needed someone to show up. His only offense was being in her life. She set the letter down. He's trying to scare you away from me, she said. I figured, Cole said. She looked up at him. Are you scared? He thought about it. Not in the way people think about things when they want to appear thoughtful, but in the way Cole thought about everything, actually and carefully, like the answer deserved the real version of the question. No, he said. I've been in situations that required genuine fear. This isn't one of them. This is a man with a printer and an attorney and a need to feel like he controls things he doesn't control. He could make your life difficult. He could try, Cole said simply, but my life is pretty straightforward. I drive, I pay my bills. I have a clean record and nothing to hide. There's not much surface for him to grab onto. Lana stood up and took the letter to the kitchen counter and photographed it with her phone, front and back, and sent the images to Riley with a message that said, New development. Call me when you can. Then she set the phone down and turned back to Cole. I have to give you every exit here, she said. I need you to know that. I am not going to hold you to anything. If you want to step back from this until it's resolved, I will understand that completely, and it will not change what I think of you. Cole looked at her across the small kitchen. Lana, he said, I mean it. I know you mean it, he said. That's why I'm about to say this clearly, so we don't have to have this particular conversation again. He held her gaze. I don't want the exit. I don't need the exit. I'm not a man who takes exits when exits are offered out of politeness. If I wanted to leave, I would leave. I'm still here because I want to be here. That's the whole answer. The room was very quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street below. The refrigerator made its small sound. Lana felt something shift in her chest. Not dramatically, not in the way that gets described in the kind of stories that sand everything down to its most presentable surface. It was quieter than that, more like something that had been braced for impact, slowly, carefully, deciding it was safe to stop bracing. She crossed the kitchen and hugged him. Not a romantic gesture, not a performance. Just a person holding on to another person because they needed to, and because the other person was steady enough to hold. He put his arms around her and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Riley called back 11 minutes later. Lana answered, stepping back and taking a breath. "I got the images," Riley said. "This is actually good news." "Tell me how a cease and desist sent to my boyfriend is good news." "Because it's a mistake," Riley said, and Lana could hear the focused energy in her voice. "Grant just showed his hand. He has been careful up until now. Untraceable, deniable, operating through intermediaries. But this letter has his company's name on it. He sent it directly to Cole, who has done absolutely nothing that could legally justify this. This is not a legitimate legal action. This is intimidation dressed up in legal language, and the fact that he sent it means he's rattled. Rattled people make mistakes, and this is the first one with his actual name on it." Lana looked at Cole, who was leaning against the counter watching her with a calm expression. "What do we do with it?" she said. "We add it to the file," Riley said, "and we keep building, because I have a feeling Grant Aldrich is not done making mistakes." She was right, but the mistake that changed everything did not come from Grant. It walked into Merle's diner on a slow Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks later, ordered a black coffee, and sat across from Lana in the corner booth for 45 minutes. And what she said in those 45 minutes was the thing that broke the whole structure open. Her name was Tess Garland. She was somewhere in her mid-40s, with the kind of face that had probably been warm and open once, and had become careful over time. Not cold, just careful. The way faces get when they have spent years monitoring themselves in rooms where the wrong expression carried consequences. She wore a gray coat and sensible shoes, and she carried a canvas bag that was slightly too full, like she had packed it in a hurry, or like she was someone who always carried more than she needed just in case. She came in on a Tuesday, which was one of Lana's shorter shifts, and she sat in the corner booth and ordered a black coffee and looked at the table for a moment before looking up at Lana with the particular expression of someone who has rehearsed what they are about to say many times and is now not entirely sure any of the rehearsals were adequate. "Are you Lana?" she said. Lana looked at her. "Depends on who's asking." "My name is Tess Garland. I saw your name on a community forum post about tenant rights a few months ago." She wrapped both hands around the coffee mug, even though it had just been poured and was still very hot. "I've been trying to decide whether to come find you for a while. I almost didn't come today." Lana studied her for a moment. The diner was quiet. Beth was in the back. There was one other customer, a retired man named Vince, who came in every Tuesday and read the paper and never wanted anything but decaf and to be left in peace. Lana slid into the seat across from Tess. "I'm Lana," she said. "Talk to me." Tess looked at her hands around the mug. Then she looked up. "I worked for Grant Aldrich for 7 years," she said, "as his personal assistant. I left 8 months ago." The air in the booth changed. Lana did not move. She kept her face steady and her hands flat on the table, and she said nothing, because she understood instinctively that the most important thing she could do in this moment was not interrupt. "I left because I couldn't keep watching," Tess said. "That's the honest answer. It wasn't one thing. It was the accumulation of things over a long time. But there was a specific moment, about a year before I left, where I understood clearly what kind of man I was working for. And I stayed for another year anyway, because I was scared, and because I told myself it wasn't my business, and because I had a life built around that job, and I didn't know what I was without it." She paused. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like someone who was in a difficult position," Lana said carefully. Tess looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. "After I left, I spent a few months just trying to get my bearings. And then I started reading things. About you. Not because I was looking for you specifically, but because Grant's name kept coming up in my head, and I kept following threads. She set the mug down. I know what he's doing to you. What do you know? Lana said. I know the pattern because I watched him use it before. Not on you. On someone before you. Tess's voice was steady, but there was an effort behind the steadiness that was visible if you knew how to look. A woman named Mara. She was a senior analyst at the firm. She and Grant had a professional conflict that became personal when she discovered certain financial arrangements that she felt should have been disclosed to investors. She raised it internally first. He responded by making her life outside the firm quietly, steadily, comprehensively difficult. She couldn't prove any of it. She eventually left the city. Lana felt the specific chill of hearing something confirmed that you already knew but had not had confirmed. How did he do it? She said. He had relationships with people in various positions. Property management companies, recruitment firms, people who owed him favors or who received favors in exchange. Nothing was ever direct. Everything was a phone call between people who had reasons to help each other that had nothing on the surface to do with Grant Aldrich. Tess looked at her steadily. It was elegant, if you want to use that word for something ugly. The whole point was that the person on the receiving end would feel it without being able to name it. And you watched this happen. I facilitated some of it, Tess said quietly. Not knowingly at first. I made calls I was told were routine. I passed on information I was told was being used for legitimate business purposes. By the time I understood what the calls and information were actually being used for, I was far enough in that I told myself I hadn't really done anything wrong. She paused. That was a lie I told myself for about 3 years. The booth was very quiet. Outside on the street, a truck rumbled past, and Lana thought briefly of Cole and then brought herself back to the woman sitting across from her. Why are you here? Lana said. Right now. Why me and why now? Tess was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because Mara didn't have anyone to tell her it was real. She thought she was losing her mind. She thought maybe she was just unlucky, that things just kept going wrong, that the world had simply decided not to cooperate with her. And I knew, the whole time, that it wasn't bad luck, and I said nothing. She looked directly at Lana. I have been carrying that for a long time. I don't want to carry it anymore. Lana held her gaze. Do you have anything? Documentation. Anything concrete? Tess reached into her canvas bag, the one that was slightly too full, and she placed a manila envelope on the table between them. Emails, she said. Printed and also on a drive that's inside that envelope. Internal communications, I retained copies of when I left. I kept them because I always knew, in some part of myself, that someday someone was going to need them. She pushed the envelope across the table. There are things in there that connect specific actions to specific instructions from Grant directly. Not everything, but enough. Lana looked at the envelope. She did not pick it up immediately. Tess, she said, you understand that if this goes somewhere, if this becomes part of a legal process, you will not be invisible in that process. He will know it came from you. I know, Tess said. Are you prepared for that? Tess looked at her with the careful face that had once been warm and open. I've been afraid of Grant Aldrich for 8 years. 7, while I worked for him, and 1 since I left. I'm tired of being afraid of him. She nodded at the envelope. Take it, please. Let it be useful. Lana picked up the envelope. She called Riley from the back room of the diner 15 minutes later, while Tess sat in the corner booth and drank a second coffee and stared at the table with the expression of someone who has just put down something heavy and is not yet sure how to stand without it. I need you to come to the diner, Lana said when Riley answered. When? Now. As soon as you can. A brief pause. 20 minutes. Riley arrived in 18. She was wearing her coat over what appeared to be a lunch she had abandoned, a napkin still tucked into her collar that she removed and pocketed without acknowledgement. She sat across from Tess, introduced herself in 4 words, and opened the envelope. She read for a long time. Lana stood near the counter and watched Riley's face and tried to read it the way you try to read a face that has been professionally trained not to give things away. But at a certain point, about 12 minutes in, something moved in Riley's expression. Small, controlled, but there. She looked up at Tess. "How did you retain these without authorization?" she said. "My access wasn't fully revoked until 2 weeks after my last day," Tess said. "I was still closing out projects. The emails were in folders I had legitimate access to. I made copies before my access ended." Riley looked at her for a moment. "Did anyone tell you to retain them?" "No." "Did anyone know you were retaining them?" "No." Riley nodded slowly and looked back down at the documents. "There's an email chain here that connects Grant directly to a property management company called Hartwell Holdings." "Owens Building," Lana said immediately. Riley looked at her. "Owens Building is managed by a subsidiary of Hartwell Holdings." The 3 women sat with that for a moment. "There's more," Riley said, tapping a page near the bottom of the stack. "This one is a communication between Grant and someone identified only by initials, TR, regarding a candidate at a nonprofit organization. The language is careful, but the instruction is clear. A concern needs to be raised with a donor contact. No specifics, just a concern." Lana thought of Grace's phone call, the major donor who had raised a concern about a candidate in the final round. The job that had disappeared without explanation. Her jaw tightened. "Can you use this?" she said to Riley. Riley squared the pages and placed them carefully back in the envelope. "Yes," she said. "I can use this." She looked at Tess. "I need a formal statement from you, detailed. Everything you told Lana, and everything the documents represent from your direct knowledge. It will need to be notarized. Can you do that?" "Yes," Tess said. "When?" "Whenever you need me to." Riley stood up and put the envelope under her arm. She looked at Lana. "I'm going to make some calls this afternoon. I think we're closer than I thought we were." Then she looked at Tess. "What you're doing takes courage. I want you to know that I don't say that to everyone." Tess nodded. She looked, Lana thought, like someone who had just exhaled after holding their breath for a very long time. Riley moved quickly over the following 2 weeks, with the focused energy of someone who had been handed the piece they had been waiting for and knew exactly where it fit. Tess's formal statement was notarized within 3 days. The email documentation was verified by a digital forensics contact Riley used for exactly this kind of work, confirming the metadata, the timestamps, the account origins, all of it consistent, none of it altered. The connection between Hartwell Holdings and Grant Aldrich's personal network of associates was documented through public business records, cross-referenced with the internal emails Tess had provided. The communication regarding the nonprofit candidate was matched against the timeline of Lana's final round interview and Grace's subsequent phone call. Riley compiled everything into a formal legal package. When she was done, she called Lana into her office and laid it out on the cleared desk, which was the first time Lana had seen that desk without stacks of folders on it. "What you're looking at," Riley said, "is a documented pattern of deliberate interference in your housing, your employment, and the personal life of Cole Mercer through the issuance of a legally baseless cease and desist. Each individual element is supported by either documentary evidence, witness testimony, or both." She folded her hands on the desk. "I'm going to send this to Grant's legal team today with a letter that gives them 72 hours to respond before we file." "File where?" Lana said. "Civil court, intentional interference with economic relations," abuse of legal process for the cease and desist, and a harassment claim supported by the pattern of conduct. She paused. I want to be honest with you. Civil litigation against someone with Grant's resources can be long and expensive, but I don't think it's going to get that far. Why not? Because his attorneys are going to read this package, and they are going to tell him exactly what it means to have his name on internal communications that directly contradict the deniability he has spent months carefully constructing. And they are going to tell him that Tess Garland is a credible, documented witness with clean hands. Riley looked at her steadily. Grant Aldrich has spent his entire career being the person in the room who knows more than everyone else. What he is about to receive is a document that demonstrates that someone else has been paying attention. Men like him find that very difficult to sit with. What? The package was sent at 4:17 on a Thursday afternoon. Grant's attorneys responded in 51 hours. They wanted to negotiate. The settlement meeting happened on a Tuesday, which Lana noted with a quiet, private amusement, since Tuesdays had become, in the past several months, the day when important things happened. It was held in a neutral conference room in a building neither party owned, which had been Riley's stipulation and which Grant's team had accepted without argument, which Riley said was itself a signal. Grant was not present. He was represented by two attorneys, both of whom wore the specific expression of people executing instructions they had not been consulted about and were professionally required not to have opinions on. The terms that emerged from 3 hours of negotiation were these. All interference with Lana's housing, employment, and personal relationships would cease immediately and permanently, with any future violation constituting automatic breach subject to substantial financial penalties. Financial damages were paid to Lana, an amount Riley had calculated based on the lost employment opportunity and the costs Lana had incurred during the period of interference. And there was a third term, the one Riley had insisted on, and which Grant's attorneys had resisted longest before conceding. A formal written acknowledgement, signed by Grant Aldrich personally, that he had engaged in a pattern of conduct designed to harm a private individual. Not a public statement, not a press release, a document, filed, existing in the permanent record of a legal proceeding in a way that could not be deleted or revised or reframed as something else. Lana signed her portion of the agreement with a steady hand. Riley clicked her pen closed and said, in the same tone she might use to note that the weather had cleared, "That's done then." One of Grant's attorneys collected the signed documents with the careful efficiency of someone who wanted to be somewhere else. The other held the door. Neither of them said anything to Lana on the way out. She stood in the corridor outside the conference room with Riley beside her and felt the specific quality of a silence that is not empty but full. The silence of something that has been resolved, not perfectly, not without cost, but finally and honestly and on terms she had chosen. "How do you feel?" Riley said. Lana thought about it. "Like I can breathe from the bottom of my lungs," she said. Riley nodded, as if this was a clinically appropriate response. "Go home," she said. "Not to work, not to the file. Home." Cole was parked outside the building. He had not been inside. He had not been part of the meeting. He had simply known what time it was scheduled to end and had driven across town and parked and waited, in the same way he did most things, without announcement, without requiring acknowledgement, just present, because being present was the thing that was needed. Lana walked out of the building and saw the truck at the curb and felt something move through her that she did not try to name or contain. She walked to the passenger side and got in. Cole looked at her. "How did it go?" "It's done," she said. He nodded once. Then he said, "Are you hungry?" She laughed. It came out of her fully and honestly, the kind of laugh that arrives when the pressure has been so sustained for so long that relief doesn't know what shape to take, and chooses laughter, because it is the most honest available option. "I'm starving," she said. He pulled out from the curb and drove, and she did not ask where they were going, and he did not tell her, and the city moved past the windows in the early evening light, and she sat in the passenger seat of a truck driver's cab, feeling more herself than she had felt in longer than she could accurately measure. That night, after they had eaten, Cole drove them east of town to a stretch of highway that opened up away from the lights, the kind of road that feels like it belongs to whoever is on it at that particular hour. He pulled over onto the shoulder and cut the engine, and they sat in the cab with the windows down and the dark spread out ahead of them, like something patient that had been waiting for them to arrive. The air smelled like open ground and the very edge of spring. Lana looked out through the windshield for a while. "I used to think my best life had to look impressive," she said. "The house, the name, the events. I thought the measure of whether your life was going well was whether someone looking at it from the outside would want it." Cole didn't say anything. He was listening. "I don't think that anymore," she said. "I know that's obvious. I know it's the kind of thing people say when they've come through something hard and need to believe it meant something. But I genuinely don't think it anymore. It's not a thing I'm telling myself. It's a thing I know." She turned to look at him. "I want this," she said. "Soup when I'm cold. Someone who says thank you and means it. Someone who pulls over when they're driving because the person calling them matters more than the schedule." She paused. "I want the real version of things. I didn't know for a long time that I was allowed to just want that." Cole looked at her in the way he had of looking at things he was taking completely seriously. "You were always allowed to want it," he said. "You just had someone spending a lot of energy convincing you otherwise." He reached over and took her hand. His hand was warm and steady, and there was no performance in the gesture, no calculation, just a person holding another person's hand in the dark because they wanted to, and because it was the right thing to do in that moment. They sat like that for a while without talking. The road stayed empty, the dark stayed patient, and Lana sat in the passenger seat of a truck driver's cab on the shoulder of a highway east of town, feeling something she recognized, after a long time of not recognizing it, as peace. 1 year later, Lana co-owned Merle's. Beth had approached her about it 6 months after the settlement, not because Lana had asked or suggested it, but because Beth had been watching her for over a year and had decided, in the quiet, practical way Beth decided things, that Lana was the right person to carry the place forward alongside her. They had worked out the details over 2 lunches and a handshake, which was the most straightforward professional conversation Lana had been part of in years. She had kept the diner exactly as it was. Same menu, same booths with the same rips in the vinyl. Same coffee that was never exceptional, but was always hot and always there. She had added one thing, a small community board near the door where local nonprofits and organizations could post information, which had been her idea and which Beth had approved with a single nod. Cole's routes were shorter now. He was home more nights than not. He had his tools in the corner of her apartment and a mug on her shelf that was specifically his, and a familiarity with the layout of her kitchen that had accumulated over many months of simply being there. They had not made large declarations about any of this. They had just lived it, one day at a time, until it had become the shape of things. Tess had found work with a financial oversight consultancy that specifically recruited people with inside knowledge of how large firms operated. She was, by her own account, the most thorough person on their team. She and Lana had coffee once a month, on Tuesdays, which had become a standing arrangement that neither of them had formally proposed but both of them kept. Riley had taken on 3 more cases in the year since Lana's. 2 of them had settled quickly once the opposing parties understood that she built her cases the way she had built Lana's, carefully, completely, with no gaps to slip through. The 3rd was still in process, and Riley said she expected it to resolve the same way. Grant's name still appeared in business publications. Aldrich Capital still moved markets. He had not been publicly exposed, had not lost his firm or his standing or his access to the rooms that mattered in his world. The acknowledgement document existed in a legal file that was not public record. But something had shifted around him in the way that things shift when the truth exists somewhere in documented form, even if it is not visible. Certain doors were slower. Certain calls took longer to be returned. The specific atmosphere around a person when some of the people who know them have come to know them more completely. Accountability, Lana had come to understand, did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived as a slow, permanent, quiet change in the temperature of a room. She kept the cease and desist letter in the drawer of the small desk in the back office at Merle's. Not where she would see it every day. Not displayed. Just there. She kept it because it was the document that had Grant's name on it and Cole's name on it, and because it represented the moment when a man with every resource available had decided that the most powerful move he had left was to try to frighten a truck driver who had done nothing except show up consistently for someone he cared about. And the truck driver had set it on the kitchen table without drama and asked if she was scared and then stayed anyway. She thought about that sometimes, what it meant that the most powerful move a billionaire could find had failed not because of legal strategy or documentation or a sharp attorney in a cluttered office, though all of those things had mattered, but because the person it was aimed at was simply not the kind of man who left. There was a lesson in that. She had turned it over many times in the past year, and it always came back to the same thing. Power that depends on fear only works on people who can be made afraid. And the people who are hardest to make afraid are not the ones with the most resources, or the most connections, or the most carefully constructed lives. They are the ones who have already decided what they are not willing to give up. Cole had decided that before she even knew his name. She had taken longer, but she had decided it too. On a Wednesday evening in early spring, almost exactly 2 years after a man in a wet flannel shirt had walked into Merle's and ordered whatever was hot and said thank you twice, Lana was closing up the diner. She was wiping down the counter when Cole came through the door, which she had not yet locked, shaking rain off his jacket the same way he had that first night, like he had been walking through a storm for miles. He sat at the far end of the counter. She looked at him. He picked up the laminated menu and read it with the same focused attention he had given it the very first time. She walked over. "What can I get you?" she said. He looked up. His eyes were the same, steady, earned tired, completely present. "Whatever's hot," he said. "I've been driving since 4 this morning." She brought him the soup. He looked at the bowl and then looked up at her. "Thank you," he said. And then, because he was Cole, and because some things do not change, and because the things that do not change are often the most important ones, he looked back down at the bowl and said it again. "Thank you." Twice. She leaned against the counter across from him and watched him eat, and thought about the life that had been required to arrive at this specific ordinary moment. The marriage, and the suffocation, and the packed bag, and Dana's tea, and the diner, and the rain, and the letter on the kitchen table, and the highway at night, and the settlement, and the drawer in the back office, and all of it, every hard and costly piece of it. And she thought that if she had known, at the beginning, everything it was going to take, she would do it again. Every single day she would do it again. Because on the other side of everything it had taken was this: a counter, a bowl of soup, a steady man who said thank you and meant it. The real version of things. It turned out that was enough. It turned out that was in fact everything. And that is the story of Lana Voss, who had everything the world said she should want, and walked away from all of it, not for a truck driver, but for herself. Cole just happened to already be there when she arrived. If this story reached something in you, something you needed to hear today, then do one thing right now. Hit the like button. Not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, but because Lana's story, and every story like it, deserves to be heard by more people who need it. And if you know someone who is living inside a beautiful life that feels hollow, someone who has forgotten they are allowed to want the real version of things, share this video with them. You might not know how much they need it. Subscribe to Consequential Stories with Benjamin, because every week we bring you stories that are not just entertaining, but true in the way that matters, true to the human experience of making hard choices and finding out what you are made of on the other side of them. Write in the comments, what is one thing you refuse to give up, even when it cost you? I read every single comment, every one. Thank you for staying with me until the end. That, right there, means everything.